Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Agenda. I'm Ewan Gorn. Coming up on the programme, businesses are suffering from the works along Douglas Promenade, but who should be offering to pay them compensation? Douglas Council shouldn't have to, says leader David Christian, who's insisting it's central government's responsibility. Onchan Commissioners are wary of major development under the Eastern Area Plan, and a play park revamp in Port Erin has come at an unfortunate time. Central government should compensate the businesses suffering due to the Promenade regeneration scheme, not Douglas Council. That's the view of the local authorities leader David Christian, who says as a national project it's not up to the council to offer rates discounts for those affected by the works. A Tynwald committee heard several weeks ago that businesses along the promenade had seen a downturn in trade since the scheme began and felt communication from central government had been lacking. According to Mr Christian, the Treasury is now directing those aggrieved parties to the rating tribunal to claim rates rebates from the council. He insists there's no room in the authorities' budgets to offer this compensation, which could cost £100,000 to £200,000, he estimates, and says any of these costs would have to be passed on to all Douglas ratepayers. Mr Christian also said there'd been rumblings within Tynwald that the relationship between the council and government hadn't been going smoothly over the promenade. I asked him about this perception.
Well, I think it was the Tynwald debate. It came across as quite negative, and then it was reported in the media where the Minister Harmer, and I mean, who would want his job at the moment, basically turned around and said that he hadn't had a very good response from the council in relation to the issues going on the promenade, in relation to businesses who were saying they're suffering possible grants or reduction in rates or whatever. And I found that quite hard to swallow when I was listening to the debate on Manx Radio, because my officers spoke to me before they went along and engaged with Treasury and DOI. We knew exactly what they were going forward to say, and straight after meetings that took place they reported straight back to me, and we've tried to be as cooperative as we can. We've supplied all the information that we've been asked to supply in relation to the business properties and rates and everything down there. So I think it came across as quite a negative response and made it look as if the council just didn't care less about our ratepayers on the promenade.
Do you think it didn't reflect the reality there with what the relationship is like?
Yeah, it didn't reflect it. I mean, I got straight on to our Director of Finance to turn around and say, I've just heard this in the Tynwald debate. It seems different to what you've come back and said to me. And the director then listened and had it played back again and turned around and said, well, this does not resemble the meetings that actually took place. So
just one of the statements you make, you're maintaining a positive engagement with all the groups in government here over the Promenade scheme. But what do you make of what businesses have had to say so far? Because some have seen an immediate impact, a negative impact on their businesses already.
I'm sure they have. I mean, I travel the promenade most days and I walk the promenade several times a week. And the number of people that have actually approached me, people who are down there walking, but also one or two businesses as well who've spotted me. And I think pretty much from day one turned around and said they'd started to see an impact on their business. I think we always all knew this was going to happen. You cannot do a major scheme like that along the seafront of Douglas and not have an impact. Where we're coming from is we're rather concerned to say that, well, did the department not carry out an economic impact assessment prior to the scheme being put to Tynwald?
Do you know if they did?
Well, I don't know, but you would hope that hadn't been undertaken. If it had been undertaken, surely they would have looked to see what impact it would have on local businesses and what support may be needed for those businesses. I would say not through DOI, but through economic development. But surely they would have recognised that it was going to have a major impact. I know it's running behind. I know they've hit problems, and we've got a lot of sympathy with the department in relation to that. But at the end of the day, people down there are finding it tough going, and I think that it's a government scheme. It's not a council scheme. So the government have got to come forward with some sort of support for these people who are suffering.
And there had, of course, been mention in some quarters of potential a rates rebate or a rates holiday, but you come out to say we can't do that. Can you just explain why?
Yeah, well, obviously the collection of raters for the providing of all the services the council provides, so bin emptying, street lights, cleaning of the beach, public libraries, public toilets, all the services that we operate, everybody pays their rates to contribute to those services. Now, if we end up having to give rate rebates along Douglas Promenade and nobody's actually assessed how much this could be, but say it's £100,000, £200,000, that money's just not there. So if we have that loss of income, I'm afraid it's going to have an impact on next year's rates, because we're simply going to have to pass that cost on to all Douglas ratepayers.
But you're not being asked to do that by the department, are you? Is that just a suggestion that's been sort of put into the air?
It's sort of been indicated to us now that anybody who's putting in a claim and is raising these issues, they're being advised to be referred to the rating tribunal. And of course, I think we can put comment in prior, but once the decision is made, we have no right of appeal from what I'm led to believe. So
but is that fair when it's a government, not a council scheme?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I've come out with this statement. I'm saying this is a government scheme. We're working with the government in relation to all the new street lighting, for ducting going in for CCTV. We're looking to modernise the gardens, put all new furniture down there. So the council is contributing an awful lot to this scheme, probably in the tune of about £1 million the Douglas ratepayers are putting into this scheme. So on that side, I think we do work very well together. But when it comes down to compensating and recognising the impact it's having on people, it is a government scheme. It's up to government to recognise that, and it's up to government to compensate these businesses. And I would urge government to do so, because we don't want to see any of these businesses disappearing from Douglas Promenade. You know, it's a very short time during the summer they have the chance to actually make some good money. So let's hope the government does get behind them and will actually support them one way or another.
Politically, it's very, the right thing for council, I suppose, is to say, maintain positive engagement. You've said before you want this through, and it's about time we all club together to get this through. But at the same time, are you cautious to say, yes, we're positive about this, but also there's a clear distinction between the local authority and government here, and in any demands of compensation are going to up our rates, essentially?
Well, without a doubt, and that really is the bottom line. We know clearly what our responsibilities are. We know where we're putting a contribution into the Promenade scheme. That's very clear, and that working relationship is spot on. But at the end of the day, if there is any compensation given out, and the only way it could affect the council in the form of compensation is if people won a rates reduction, and that could be a 50% rates reduction. And as I've already turned around and said, that sum of money then would have to be found in the next financial year, and that then would increase the burden on all Douglas ratepayers. So this is a government capital scheme. The scheme should have had an area in it that assessed the likely cost to local businesses, and a compensation package should have been in place to assist those who need it.
One area I did want to ask you about, which is promenade related, that the council have also suffered from, car parks. It was mentioned in council, not the last meeting, I believe it was the previous meeting, that you've been losing money from some of your car parks due to the amount of temporary spaces that have been offered by government on Loch Promenade Walkway. So has that situation changed since the council raised those concerns?
Unfortunately, it hasn't, and the department has not responded positively to us at all. We've had further correspondence in the last week or two where they are indicating the number of spaces that have been provided against the number of spaces that are lost. It does get quite complicated, and it's hard for people to understand, but particularly from March to April, when all the promenade was available on Loch Promenade, then that's when we had the major impact in our car parks, because obviously Loch Promenade area, the people parking there are normally the shoppers, because obviously of the 2-hour stay. The majority of spaces that were lost were over Central and Queen's Promenade, and once you got out of disc zones over there, people were parking all day, so they really had no impact on our car parks at all. Where the impact was when there was 200 spaces provided on the walkway, and all those spaces were available on Loch Promenade roadway for 2 hours. That's when we had the major hit. And of course we pay a licence fee to the Department of Infrastructure for Drumgold Street and Chester Street car park, and we've seen a major hit in those car parks. Now, I think it's going to be an argument that's going to go on for a considerable period of time. We've always accepted that temporary car parking had to be provided, but it's got to be measured. At the end of the day, we're all human, and if you've got the chance of parking free rather than paying the car parking fee, you're going to do it. I fully accept that. But again, the department's going to have to accept they cannot expect us to pay the full licence fee to them if our income has dropped so much. How
much of it is down to the scrapping of free Sunday parking, though?
Yeah, we're having another look at that now at the moment. I am concerned about it because I think there will be an element of an impact there, but what we've noticed is the decline is every day of the week. And the funny thing is, even a Saturday, the car park, it's got no busier on a Saturday. Even when the free parking went on a Sunday, so you think, well, the car park be full on a Sunday because it was free. Well, people didn't suddenly think, well, now I've got to pay on a Sunday, I'll go down on the Saturday. The levels pretty much were staying the same. So, that didn't really seem to have the impact. People will come into town the day that they need to come into town or want to come into town. But we do want to look at that. I had a meeting with officers yesterday and I've said, look, we need to look at all our charging system again. We are out of sync with the DOI. I think one of the reasons why car park charges have gone up in recent years is the fact we have this licence fee to pay to the DOI. It's well over £1 million. So we have to take the fees of those two car parks, and before we make any money on them, we have to pay that money over to the DOI. But
could you take ownership, or would that be too expensive?
I think it'd be too expensive, particularly Chester Street car park, because some people say that's coming to the end of its useful life. So we could be taking, a major hit there if we did take it over. And government have never offered us to take, ownership off them. But of course, the car parks are part of the whole localisation scheme. So there was a proposal to greatly increase the energy from waste fees over a number of years. And then there was discussions that went on that if local authorities take over responsibilities, grass cutting, street cleaning, gully emptying and all the rest of it, the fees won't go up there, and the money you're saving, you use that then to pay for these services. Well, in Douglas's case, it got very complicated because we had a grant of £680,000 a year that just disappeared. So that's when they said, well, hang on, if you take over the car parks, you can make the difference up through the car park income. So we pay them the fee. So the department is no worse off than what it was when they were running them. And then how we get any money then to make up the grant that went away is by the excess on the car park fees. So, of course, the fee for the car park to the government goes up annually. So, of course, we have to put the car parking charges up annually. And, of course, they keep their car parking charges lower. So we've got out of sync. So that discussion has got to be had. I say it is complicated. I'm probably losing everybody with this subject now. But the whole localisation package is good for Douglas ratepayers, because if the energy from waste plant had carried on putting the fees up the way they were, rates would be a lot higher today. So we are still better off in that package. But all it takes is, for example, now this free car parking, and we see car parking revenue drop and the licence fee stayed the same, and suddenly the Douglas ratepayers are actually worse off. So it's something we're monitoring very closely, and I hope we can engage better with the department, and I think it's getting to the stage where there'll be a political meeting between myself and the Minister.
Do you think people get that local authorities are heavily influenced by government? Do you think people understand the link sometimes in things like car parking prices, waste charges, those kind of things?
I don't think they do, to be honest with you, because there's so many people within the town, well, around the island. I'm sure it doesn't just happen in Douglas, but the number of people that have come to me to criticise the promenade scheme, well, it's the council, isn't it? It's in Douglas, so it must be the council. That unfortunately, no matter how you try to get that message out there, people on the island generally, unless you are politically motivated, don't seem to take a great deal of interest until there's something that actually affects them, and then they switch on. And they very quickly switch off again once it's resolved. So it is hard to engage to get people to understand the difference, and I think it's probably even harder in Douglas because the paths between council and government do cross over so much, because if you think of the major central master plan that was being drawn up, which was government-led, but we played a major part in the redevelopment of Lower Douglas, the regeneration of the town centre, government schemes, but heavily influenced by council and finances from council. So the public find it hard to understand, but these decisions aren't made willy-nilly. There's a lot of work goes on behind the scenes, and for localisation and taking on these car parks, it's stacked up financially for Douglas ratepayers. But at the moment, it is heading the other way. So we accept there's got to be additional car parking, but it must only be replacing the numbers that are missing for the scheme. And unfortunately, what the department's not realising at the moment is that the promenade is completely different. Queen's Promenade and Central Promenade were not your shoppers. Very few people parked over there to come into town to shop. They were different users. So we've got to get that message across. And at the end of the day, if we need a bit of banging around, thumping on the table and a bit of head knocking together, well, I'm sure me and the Minister will do it, even if it's to one another.
The leader of Douglas Council, David Christian. You're listening to Agenda on Manx Radio. Major new development in Onchan would cause major problems for infrastructure in the village. That's according to the chairman of local commissioners. Robin Turton has warned construction of large numbers of homes would place further strains on already stressed traffic and schools in the district. It comes ahead of an inquiry into the Eastern Area Plan, as we know, a draft government document which will zone land for development in the east of the island. As an aside, it's worth mentioning further evidence ahead of that inquiry was published by the Cabinet Office last week. You can access that via the government's website. Well, back to Onchan, a site at Ballacring has been earmarked for a possible 200 new homes, whilst a number of fields by Ashley Road have been labelled as strategic reserve. Well, I asked Mr Turton whether he felt Onchan could take any new homes.
Well, Onchan has developed, probably one of the leading authorities in developing over the last 30 years. We've had major estates built. And I think the general feeling is that we are reaching the point where major developments will cause problems for the infrastructure and road system of the village. It's very much the desire, I think, of both the commissioners and the residents that we remain a village and not become a town.
Is there space for any large development?
Well, that depends on who you ask. The government seem committed that there is room for large-scale development in one area. But generally speaking, I don't think it's the view of the board or of the residents of Onchan.
Do ratepayers seem against big development, like you said?
I think those directly affected by it, where it's proposed is, yes, they object. Generally speaking, I do believe it's a view of the village that we're reaching a saturation point on large scale. It causes major problems through the village traffic now, coming in from outside Onchan, and another big development in Onchan is only going to aspirate them.
Do you need homes in Onchan, though? Is there a demand for new properties?
Personally, and it isn't a personal opinion, I would like to see more homes for young people. I don't want us to become a retirement village. I want us to be a vibrant village, and to achieve that, we've got to have young families and people coming into the village.
The Eastern Area Plan earmarked some sites in Onchan for possible development. Ballacrint, 200 homes, strategic reserve. Ashley Road as well, areas there mentioned. What's reaction been to those sites appearing on this plan? Are people welcoming that? Do those sites need developing, or is it a mixture of opinion?
I think the people living who are directly affected are very much against the major development. They see it as the traffic and the infrastructure that's required is not needed in Onchan. We have small plots of land, about take 5, maybe 10 houses at a time, and I think the general feeling of the rest of the village is, and it's only my opinion on that, is that the development of them sites will meet a lot of our needs in the village.
Have the board got a position on development of a large scale?
I think the board is primarily against it, but I have to say that we've put all the paperwork out. It's going out in the village now. We'll have a meeting in August, and we were very much led by the views of the residents then.
Are you concerned about development not just in Onchan, but also, say, Bulldrine, where a number of sites have been earmarked for development areas out in Garth, with the effect that that will have on traffic coming through the village?
Yes, without a doubt it's going to increase it. I mean, delays in the village morning and evening now are quite heavy, and school time it's quite busy. And also, if there's large-scale developments, where are these people's children? And I hope they're going to be family homes. What schools are they going to attend? Onchan 2 schools, to the best of my knowledge, are full or nearly full. Blacksea School seems to be in a similar position. I think the infrastructure is very worrying, where you would put another school. And other facilities like doctors, dentists, all these sort of things. Once you start big developments, they have to be implemented as well.
Now, Onchan in this is called a service centre. Do you agree with that? I mean, you said it's a village and you want to retain that, but Onchan is very big compared to some other villages. So do you think the nature of the village may change if there's more people and more houses in Onchan nearby?
Possibly, yes. I think major developments have a major impact. With some of the sites that they've earmarked where there's only a few houses, hopefully that'll blend in and mix into the society.
So brownfield sites then, do you think are more preferable for development? I don't know how many brownfield sites there are in Onchan really, but do you think you'd prefer to see that over fields, I suppose?
I personally would like to see them fill the gaps basically in the village. And there's not a tremendous amount, but there's probably enough with what houses. Well, like everywhere else, we've got a number of houses up for sale in Onchan, and I'd like to see some of them being occupied and filled as well.
Onchan Commissioner Robin Turton. The chairman of Port Erin Commissioners admits closing the popular Athol Park play areas for refurbishment during the summer holidays is not ideal. Godfrey Egie says both local and off-island contractors will be working on the project, and unfortunately this means finding a time when all are free is crucial. Compan Limited will be installing the new play equipment. That's an off-island business, with local businesses completing the landscaping required for the scheme. It's costing the authority around £90,000 and is expected to take 5 weeks to complete. Well, Mr. Egie told me the board was clear improvements had to be made to the park sooner rather than later.
Well, we've been very conscious for a number of years, the current board and in fact the previous board from 2012, and I believe there was work done before that as well, that we needed to improve the park. There's been little bits done here and there, upgrades, but not really enough changes and enough improvements to make it a viable thing. So after having some public consultation last year, we decided that we needed to do upgrades and look at it seriously. So we got those consultations and took the feedback from everyone in. Obviously, we have to balance what is doable in a reasonable budget and what isn't doable. And we were very conscious that what we wanted to do was create an area for the older teenagers as well as the younger area ones. And rather than having that necessarily in the same place, which is why we've now gone for Athol Park near the railway station side for the younger, and over in where the football area near the Droggerfell Road junction, we're going to have larger teenager play area.
The timing of this has been mentioned since it's been announced. 5 weeks in August. This is a popular park closed right in the middle of summer holidays. Was that the best decision on the board's behalf?
Very valid question, to be honest. It's not down to us on the date. It's one of those things. If you want something to definitely not happen on that date, you can guarantee that's when something is going to coincide with that. That has to be. We're using the contractors Compan as our main advisory because they're from the UK and they've done a number of places. They've done Silverdale recently over here, and I believe they're going to do Laxey. They use local contractors in getting the landscaping done, which is quite a large part of doing the park. You know, the equipment is probably just over 50% of it, and then sort of 40% of something is the actual landscaping cost. It's tallying in with those UK contractors bringing and using their local ones over here to get it all to work. Now, they've suggested a date of August 12th as a start point, which obviously we're not happy ideally with, but we also are conscious we don't want to put it back and delay and then it goes into the winter, some other delays occur, or those contractors don't become available anymore. We're happy to get it moving.
So it wouldn't be possible. It wouldn't be possible just to push it back a little bit. Then would that possibly derail the process?
It's possible if we pushed it back, yeah, it could derail us and put it back for quite a while. I mean, we're conscious it could well be that it's later August before it starts. We're not forcing them to say it's the 12th. We're quite happy if it was back a couple of weeks nearer so that you've got less time with the park lost. We are knowing that we have got other areas in the village like Beagle Glen, Braddock Glen, there's the beach sport equipment. There are other things for the kids to do. And I know it's summertime and hopefully a lot of them will be on the beach and making the most of this lovely weather at the moment. We were just co-conscious we want to get it out there that we are going to do it. And we've been trying to get it done sooner and get to agreement, but it just hasn't been able to happen any sooner. So That's why, really. Not our choice to be that date, and I know it's not ideal, but unfortunately nothing ever does seem to be ideal when we try.
Interesting about the teen play area. That's not something you sort of hear very often, to be honest. What does that entail?
Right, well, in the teen area, which is, I say, near the Droggerfell end, where the football nets were, the smaller football nets in the enclosed thing, it's sort of, you've got some larger sort of climbing frame type things with, and I can't remember the proper name for it, but there's a disc thing that spins around really fast. And stuff that really suits the older teens, so it's the early teens upwards. And we were always conscious that people say they haven't got anything, areas to do things like that. I mean, apart from the existing playground, which doesn't suit them once they get above a certain age. And what we're trying to do really is get this established and then further grow it, over a period of time. We definitely want to have extra benches put in for grannies to sit on, for example, in the kiddies out that area. We might be looking at, we've mentioned things like outside table tennis, that you can get an outside table tennis court. So we're hoping to further upgrade over a period of time and improve. We want to make a good start and get something in place and expand it, really.
I know people have sometimes had issues with antisocial behaviour in Athol Park, be it perhaps later in the evening, maybe teenagers going there to drink or some would say loiter, some would say hang out. Have you thought about that in what you're designing in this project, if that makes sense?
Yes, we have considered that, and we have expanded. As you know, the CCTV cameras are now working in the village, in the main part of the village, and also the camera coverage will cover the Athol Park area, and we're going to add additional ones in that will cover the new team part down towards the Droggerfell end. We're working in partnership with MUA on that to get things resolved and upgraded. And the way the systems are, there's various options, cable-wise, wirelessly wise, etc., etc. So we're definitely aware we need it because we know we've had periods of ongoing, antisocial behaviour with different things happening. So it's a shame, and you always get these things in different generations, phases where certain people are that way inclined. But we are trying to address that as well.
And is there any fear that you're going to invest a reasonable sum of money in the park and you may potentially be open to vandalism, or is there any fear of that happening, or is that just something you've got to take as a possible?
I think we have to take that as an ongoing risk. I mean, if we said, we can't do that because it's going to get damaged, then we'd never do anything. And I think that would be pretty much in life. The equipment is robust, it should take up to some misuse. You can't always plan for that. We hear about different other incidents around the island where people have destroyed wooden benches and everything else. So you can only do your best to provide it and hope that the teenagers realise that it's a thing that if they destroy, then they're losing out on themselves as well. And hopefully the parents, they're on top of them as well. But we do our best, we'll see. But if we don't put it there in the first place, then we're failing to provide a service to the community and the ratepayers of the village. And indeed the south. This park, our plan is, it's in Port Erin, but, we know everyone in the south at different times come to Port Erin. They go on the beach, come down the village. They can come and use the park. It doesn't matter whether they're from Castletown, Maloo, Arbury, Russian, Portimao. It doesn't matter. Douglas, anywhere, Ramsey, Blackfield. So the whole point is it's part of the village to make it a nice place to be, to live and to visit, all part of it, to enhance the village.
Godfrey Egie, the chairman of Port Erin Commissioners. Well, that's all from this programme. We'll be back with more from Agenda next week, and you can listen again to this episode online as a podcast. But for now, Guramayu and goodbye.